I find solace in the understanding I share with my daughter-in-law. Following my husband's funeral, my mother-in-law, blissfully ignorant, bid me farewell with a radiant smile as she drove me away. However, the next day, panic painted her face when she visited my parents' house where I sought refuge. It was clear her scheme to secure my husband's inheritance had hit a snag. In that moment, the true gravity of ignorance struck me. My name is Emily. I'm 39, married to John, who is 2 years my junior. We have a daughter, Rose, in first grade. Living with my mother-in-law began a year ago after my father-in-law's passing. Concerned about her solitude in their spacious home, I agreed to the cohabitation. Initially, we split living expenses, offering some relief. Yet, unexpected challenges emerged as my mother-in-law started criticizing me for sharing household chores with my husband. She disapproved, asserting that it was unfit for the head of the family to engage in such tasks. Despite my role as the primary breadwinner due to a 2-year age gap with my husband, my mother-in-law remained oblivious to this fact. Frustrated, I pleaded with my husband to enlighten her about our financial dynamics, hoping to resume our shared responsibilities. However, he hesitated, revealing his reluctance to take on additional chores. Disappointed, I realized a new facet of my husband's character. Eventually, labeled a failure as a wife, I found myself shouldering all household duties alone, while my mother-in-law, a full-time housewife, remained oblivious to the imbalance. It's almost comical that she isn't fulfilling her role as a housewife, considering she should be sharing the household chores. With my husband now liberated from domestic duties, he started venturing out alone on his days off, donning casual attire despite claiming to be at work. Skepticism gnawed at me, questioning the authenticity of his purported work engagements. Moreover, on weekends, he began frequently checking his smartphone, leaving me curious about what captivated his attention. Despite my interest, he guarded his phone closely, leaving no opportunity for me to investigate. His supposed overtime hours were also inconsistent. He often returned home around the usual time or just an hour later. While suspicions of infidelity lingered, observing his routine on weekdays made me question the validity of such thoughts. A few months later, anomalies in my husband's behavior became more apparent. He had been consistent in contributing his share of living expenses, but now, instead of the customary $670, he was depositing only $600 or sometimes even $540. Perplexed, I confronted him about the financial shortfall, emphasizing my strict principles regarding money matters. With many years of marriage behind us, I expected a straightforward explanation. He nonchalantly attributed it to the company's poor performance, claiming a temporary reduction in his salary, making it challenging to meet the usual contribution. Doubtful, I pressed further, questioning whether financial cutbacks were a guise for unfaithfulness. Surprised, he vehemently denied any such betrayal, citing the presence of our family as a deterrent. While his response seemed sincere, the mystery of his weekend escapades lingered. Frustrated by the lack of clarity, I contemplated hiring a detective agency to unveil the truth. However, before I could take that step, a significant event unfolded a few days later during his work. A call from an unfamiliar number shattered the tranquility of my day. It turned out to be my husband's boss. The voice on the other end, the embodiment of concern, disclosed a distressing truth. John, my husband, had been in a traffic accident during a business errand and his life hung in the balance. The gravity of those words plunged my mind into chaos. The notion of danger to his life left me momentarily paralyzed, but soon reality snapped back. I promptly informed my boss, set aside any ongoing tasks, and rushed to the hospital, fervently wishing for his survival. Upon reaching the hospital, the devastating news awaited me. My husband had succumbed to the impact of a car collision while waiting for a green light at an intersection. Attempting to evade another vehicle that ran a red light, he stood no chance against the force of the collision. His instant demise left me grappling with an overwhelming torrent of responsibilities. Last year, I had experienced the rituals of wake and funeral preparations with the passing of my father-in-law. But then, I had my husband by my side. Now, I faced the daunting task alone. My grief-stricken mother-in-law, lost in a daze, proved incapable of offering assistance. She occasionally wandered away, seemingly seeking solace in places steeped in memories of my husband. The shock of losing both husband and son in rapid succession left her incapacitated. In the face of this tragedy, I resolved to be strong. I had to not only navigate the funeral arrangements but also prepare my daughter Rose for a future without her father. Breaking the news to Rose was an agonizing task. I explained that her father had been involved in a fatal car accident, leaving only the two of us to face the world together. Despite the uncertainty of her understanding, I felt compelled to share this harsh reality with her. As we progressed through the wake, the day of the funeral arrived, ushering in a new wave of emotions. The tension mounted, and I found myself unable to contain the flood of tears. My mother-in-law, seemingly concerned about my emotional state, approached me and uttered something utterly unbelievable. In the midst of my mourning, she callously suggested that since there was no blood relation, I should refrain from claiming John's inheritance and simply depart, leaving Rose behind. She even went so far as to question Rose's worth as my daughter, proposing that I take her when I leave. Her laughter accompanying these heartless words added an extra layer of shock. Struggling to comprehend such cruelty amid my grief, I decided to maintain composure until the funeral concluded and distance myself from my mother-in-law's callous remarks. Her smirking face lingered in my memory, fueling a desire for some form of retribution. Post-funeral, I meticulously prepared to depart, packing only the essentials for Rose and me. I approached my mother-in-law and declared my renouncement of any claim to John's inheritance, offering it to her without hesitation. Her face lit up with joy at the prospect, expressing relief and gratitude for my supposed understanding. She eagerly agreed, seemingly content with the arrangement, and happily retreated to her room, signaling the end of our association. As we left the house, I couldn't fathom the newfound happiness she exuded. Despite our initial decision to live together due to her loneliness, she now appeared content with our departure. The reasons for her joy remained elusive to me. Upon reaching my parents' house, I recounted the entire ordeal to my father, who was understandably outraged. He condemned my mother-in-law's actions, deeming her concern for inheritance immediately after John's death despicable. Concerned about our financial stability without the inheritance, my father pondered our future. However, I assured him that we would manage without it, having handled expenses on my salary alone for the past month or two. Expressing his concern for Rose's future and the importance of saving, my father generously offered us a place to live. Grateful, I accepted his kindness. Regarding my husband's inheritance, I revealed a document to my father that had recently arrived from my in-law's house. A report titled John's Conduct Investigation. It contained shocking revelations about my husband's true nature. As I spent time at my parents' house on John's bereavement leave, contemplating our next steps, the doorbell incessantly rang. Irritated by the persistent ringing, I opened the door to find my mother-in-law looking pale and agitated. Confused by her sudden change in demeanor, I responded through the intercom, urging her to stop shouting. Her outburst about my knowledge of John's substantial debt disturbed the neighbors. Reluctantly, she acquiesced to a quieter conversation, but her unexpected visit begged the question. What did she want after proclaiming just the day before that we should no longer be in contact? I responded with cold detachment, stating that it concerned John's inheritance and suggested continuing the conversation inside. However, my mother intervened, adamantly refusing entry to someone who had callously told my grieving daughter to leave during a funeral. Concerned about shielding Rose from the discussion, I concurred with my mother's decision. Unyielding, my mother-in-law insisted on finding an alternative, leading us to agree to talk at a nearby cafe. Once at the restaurant, my mother-in-law wasted no time delving into the discussion. She accused me of leaving the house easily because I knew John was drowning in debt. I confirmed her suspicion, citing John's weekend work claims, perpetual smartphone proximity, and his sudden halt in contributing to living expenses as red flags. To clarify, I hired a detective agency that revealed his gambling addiction and mounting debts, information I learned just 2 days prior. Addressing her concern about my tears at the funeral, I admitted genuine sorrow for the loss but acknowledged that, considering everything, leaving was the right decision. Intrigued, she questioned the total amount of John's debt. Startled, I revealed a demand letter I received that day, a staggering $6,700, contributing to a grand total of $33,700 in debt. I warned her that unless she renounced the inheritance, she'd be burdened with the entire sum. Dismayed by the revelation, my mother-in-law stuttered, confessing that the inheritance from her husband was already spent, $13,400 $500 on luxury items, anticipating John's inheritance. This expenditure explained her post-funeral shopping sprees. Realizing her financial recklessness, I acknowledged my inability to assist with her debt and urged her to handle the renunciation herself. I left, and in subsequent events, she managed to renounce John's negative inheritance, but the $13,500 debt remained. Attempts to seek help from relatives failed due to the rumors of her actions on the day of the funeral. In contrast, life for Rose and me took a positive turn. Despite Rose transferring schools, she embraced her new environment energetically. Living with my parents allowed me to focus on work, providing a stable income. We now spend quality weekends together, exploring shopping malls, visiting theme parks, and enjoying activities we couldn't during John's lifetime. Supported by my loving parents, our days are filled with smiles, and I am determined to sustain this newfound happiness.